Hello and welcome to the University of Law. About 7 or 8 years ago now, we got this lovely box set called The Sixth Doctor: The Last Adventure. It came out in the footsteps of Night of the Doctor, which we had in 2013 on television, and it basically gave a farewell adventure to the Sixth Doctor, who had never had a farewell on screen. It was a lovely book, which you can see here. It's got artwork in there, and you got your discs in there as well. It really was a lovely box set. Commentaries, photography. It was a really lovely set, and I think the highlight for me was this disc of the regeneration as well, and it had a cameo from the Seventh Doctor as played by Sylvester McCoy as well. And it was a lovely set, and it really did sum up the Sixth Doctor's era, both on television and on audio, and it gave it a lovely kind of send-off. It wrapped everything up, brought all those threads together and gave it a lovely cohesive roundup. Obviously the Valiana from television being his memorable enemy, but obviously all his companions with him as well. It was a lovely big event release. I think it was about 5 discs, including a documentary. And that was it. It was just a one-off, The Sixth Doctor, The Last Adventure. And I'm sure it did very well. It got lots of critical acclaim. I think a few people got confused at the time. Was it his last adventure? Colin Baker, and he said, no, it's not. It's his last adventure chronologically, but there will be other adventures set before. And obviously he's gone on to do all sorts of audios ever since. And thankfully, that doesn't look like it's going to stop. But what about The Last Adventure as a range? Well, it was always meant to be a one-off, but I think there's potential for more. And I'd love to see more box sets. I just love this design. Now, you'll have noticed if you follow my channel that there's been some recent videos where I have talked about the potential of more Last Adventures. I mentioned about the upcoming Seventh Doctor box set coming out November 2022, which clearly it's a TV movie era Seventh Doctor. And it was mentioned by David Richardson when they first announced that the main range was ending, that there was going to be some new plot threads they were going to follow. For example, the First Doctor and Dodo, well, they've done that. Second Doctor Beyond War Games, they've done that. Third Doctor and Sarah Jane, they've done that. All things they hadn't done before that they've now done. And he also mentioned what happened to the Seventh Doctor on his last day. Now, just like how the Sixth Doctor, Colin Baker, didn't get a proper regeneration story, his regeneration was tagged on to the start of the Seventh Doctor's first story. It was the same with Sylvester McCoy. His regeneration was tagged on to the start of the Eighth Doctor's first story. Now, Dark Universe, it was implied that it's set right before the TV movie, but it's not explicit. So there is room for stories after that. And I do wonder whether this, November 2022's release will either be this release or whether it's going to lead into perhaps a last adventure set called The Seventh Doctor: The Last Adventure, which gives us one last story which then leads into the TV movie. So one last hurrah, one last big adventure, and then it ends with him being summoned to go and collect the Master's remains. That would be a wonderful box set, and it'd be great as a one-off. It'd be really fun to do. They could even link in some of the threads from the audios and the TV, and also the novels as well, because there was a novel that did, called Lungbearer, that did kind of tie into it all, which I know the novel range didn't do so well, but they could potentially adapt it as a part of this box set. It could be like the Sixth Doctor: The Last Adventure. It could have several stories in it that are connected, and the last one in the box could be Lungbearer, because it's not strictly a novel adaptations box set. I know they didn't sell well, novel adaptations, but if it's just one disc and the others were original stories, you might get away with it. So there's possibilities there. Now, Dark Universe did feel like a big finale release, big event release. We had the 11 in it, we had lots of different characters from Time Lord Society, we had Ace back. It did feel like an event release, but it could be even bigger. You could have Mel, you could have all the different companions from the audio era as well. So that would be really fun. And what to me makes it look like it could be on the cards is not only have they mentioned that, but also Paul McGann in an interview this week did mention that he'd been recording a Big Finish that was linked to Night of the Doctor. And that could just mean that it's stuff set towards the end of his lifespan, or it could be that there is going to be an Eighth Doctor: The Last Adventure, because again, the Eighth Doctor didn't get a proper ending either. The Ninth Doctor just started his era on television, and a few years later we got this Night of the Doctor, the mini-sode. But what if there was a big Time War story that wrapped up all the kind of Eighth Doctor Time War, all the audio range of the Eighth Doctor, and catapulted him into, in those last moments, he saves it in one big heroic act, and just as he's celebrating, he sees a distress signal, he goes to save Cass, and that's the end of the audio. And we know that next he's going to crush and become the War Doctor. So I think that sounds quite probable as well, especially since it was mentioned in the Susan's War audios a few years ago in the documentaries that there was potentially an event release coming up in the next few years that linked all the different Time War stories together, because it's a bit like the MCU, the Time War range. There's like a Susan's War, there's an 8th Doctor, the Young War Doctor, the Old War Doctor, the War Master, Gallifrey Time War, Gallifrey War, and there's so many different ranges, and it could be that we link all those together because the Time War does feel like it has 3 distinct ages to it. The 8th Doctor, the Young War Doctor, and the Old War Doctor. So potentially it could be like a big climax to that first third where we have like the War Master and Gallifrey Time War and 8th Doctor Adventures and Susan's War. And it could be that it's bringing all of that stuff together for a final event release. Bringing all those threads together, and it's all in another video, so I won't talk too much, but it would be great if we could see what happens when the Doctor brings back his great-grandson. How does Susan react? What impact does that have on him? Does he have a final countdown with Rassilon? Do we see Davros get devoured at the hands of the Nightmare Child? The possibilities are endless, and I think it's a really exciting idea. And especially with the 60th anniversary coming up next year, it could be that we have a range of the 7th and 8th Doctor Last Adventure box sets to go with the 6th Doctor. Now, that is just 2 box sets. There could be a third. We could get the War Doctor, The Last Adventure. Now, obviously, Jonathan Carley does an impression of a performance in role, in character as the War Doctor, young. He hasn't yet done him old, but he could absolutely do that. Now, Ancients of War, again, it's implied that it leads into Day of the Doctor, because Day of the Doctor would be his final chronicle adventure. He regenerates at the end. But Ancients of War, it's implied at the end he says no more, and it could, you're meant to interpret that as leading into Day of the Doctor. However, it's not a foregone conclusion. So there could be a whole big audio drama where he has this big, there could be a big explosive story. Again, you could bring the War Master in, and there's all sorts you could do. Rassilon, what is it that leads the Doctor to finally say enough is enough, I'm grabbing the moment? What could possibly happen? What's the biggest, most terrible thing that Rassilon could do? And let's see it. Let's hear it. Let's experience it in an audio drama. I think that's possibly what we could have. So we could end up having, as well as the 6th Doctor, The Last Adventure, we could end up having also the 7th Doctor, The Last Adventure, the 8th Doctor, and the War Doctor. And who knows, we could also have the 9th Doctor, The First Adventure, because although we've seen how his story ends, see, most of the classic Doctors, we saw how they began, but not how they ended. That applies to the 6th, 7th, and 8th. The War Doctor, we didn't know anything about him. We've since had his opening and his ending, kind of, but it'd be nice to explore that a bit more. But for the 9th Doctor, we've never seen how he began. If they did a box at the 9th Doctor, The First Adventure, what happened post-regeneration, that'd be just a really fun story, just to kind of see how we peel back the character and kind of see how the 9th Doctor began. So I think for the 60th anniversary, that'd be a wonderful kind of way of celebrating it. It means that every Doctor would then have a beginning, middle, and end, which would be a first. And yeah, it just means we're celebrating lots of different eras of the show in a really fun way. And that's potentially 3, if not 4, releases to add to the Last Adventure range that already had one release. So you can end up having a 4 or 5, long collection of Last Adventures / First Adventures. So what do you think? What do you think of my theory? Obviously, this isn't confirmed. I've got no proof of this. This is just ideas of what they could do. It's got me quite excited. But what do you think? What would you want to see if there were some Last Adventures for the other Doctors on audios? Don't forget to pop that in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video and want more content. As always, thanks for watching and speak soon.